across the sea of life, so much pain. Warring divides, it's a shame. We don't see how it can be. Oh, we need to smile at each other, reach for your brother, help one another.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all.
Oh, we need to honor our mother, shelter our sisters, all to existence. God's help will come from up above, but first we need the love.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to another episode of The Y Factor. Today is May the 5th and what an eventful week has it been, Miran?
Indeed, Tasnim, it's been one set of big news followed by the other. We'll be getting into that in our news segment, but before that we just wanted to let you all know that, as promised, the episodes are up on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, and our previous guest, Zainab, the food blogger, did actually write up a blog post listing all of the restaurants that she had recommended, and there's a link to that on our Facebook page as well. Also, thank you to our listeners for putting in your feedback on our Facebook page and participating in discussions. We hope that this will continue throughout future weeks, inshallah. Especially for this week, like we said, there's heaps of news happening and we'd love to know what you think about all of it.
Definitely, I agree with Miran, not just in terms of news, but there was a lot of events happening in the Muslim community over the past week, and we do have a surprise for you on the episode this week. We're not going to spoil the surprise, but trust me, it's worth it. So stay tuned, and we're going to go to our news section for this week.
The Y Factor.
All right, so let's kick this off with the biggest news, and what can be bigger than news of Osama bin Laden's death?
Definitely. I mean, we've been inundated on news, on radio, wherever you go. It's OBL, so which is really, really interesting. Now,
I think the main thing I was interested in ever since the news was released was the different ways in which it was covered. I mean, it's one piece of news, but they're going to drag this on for God knows how long. So the first day it was like, oh, okay, Osama bin Laden died. And then the next day it's all about the conspiracy theories, like, did he die? Why did they chuck his body in the ocean? And,
according to Islamic rituals.
Yeah. And then the third day you get information about how he used his wife as a human shield. Oh, wait a second, was that right news? Maybe he used... his wife actually chucked herself out in front of him as a human shield. So you had all that kind of stuff happening.
And then yesterday they came out to clarify, just in case, anyone thought that human shields were used. They're like, no, they were both unarmed and she happened to go there and she happened to be shot in the leg. Definitely very interesting. I think...
the latest today, Tasnim, as well, you were telling me before, is that they found apparently his will, but also Barack Obama has come out and said that he will not release photos of Osama bin Laden's body because he thinks that it will be offensive, which is interesting because I saw a comment in reply to that saying, well, how could you consider that offensive but not consider that pictures of the bodies of dead Palestinian children, for example, are offensive, or dead Afghans slaughtered in the war?
And it's really interesting because they said due to the sensitivities of Muslims. Now, that's a discussion we're going to have. But before we get to that, you mentioned the issue of the will. And I just wanted to read it out to our audience what the will actually said. Now, apparently, he actually wrote this will after September 11. And it was actually published by a Kuwaiti newspaper. In the will, he says, "You, my children," and he actually means his children, not metaphorically everybody else. He goes, "You, my children, I apologize for giving you so little time because I responded to the need of jihad." In the 4-page document, he also goes on to say, give instructions to his wives. He says, "Do not consider marrying again and devote yourselves to your children and guide them to the right path." And he actually signs it by saying, your brother Osama bin Laden. And it's interesting because he's actually believed to have inherited 27.6 million from his father, but there's actually no instructions on what to do with the money. But he does give them instructions.
Well, let's just put it out there that this is an alleged will. We don't know that this is, accurate. I mean, the newspaper...
It was published by a Kuwaiti newspaper.
Yeah, the newspaper says it is, but obviously it's like all those people who are coming out and saying, is he really dead, or is any of this really true? It's a bit hard to believe. I mean, you spend all these years thinking about this guy who's wanted and no one knows where he is. Everyone's trying to track him down.
The most interesting thing is his instructions to his 24 children, because he's got 24 children from 4 wives, right? He says, do not follow jihad. And that's what apparently the will says. And, this the Kuwaiti article goes on to say that even Umar ibn al-Khattab, who was radiallahu anhu, the Khalif, said that to his son Abdullah not to join the Holy War. Now, I'm quoting from the Kuwaiti newspaper,
right.
So this is not what we have to say.
So, according to the Kuwaiti newspaper, which alleges that is the will of Osama bin Laden, he tells his kids,
that's right,
don't actually join Al-Qaeda.
That's right. That's really interesting because, as you mentioned earlier, Miran, this issue of Osama bin Laden, I think you can split it into 3 camps. The first camp is basically rhetoric, right? So the US doing this, like, you know, Hollywood Disney drama, like bad guy caught by the
cowboys
good guy.
and the Indians.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. The second issue is political analysts coming out and saying, you know what, Osama bin Laden basically is redundant as a person.
Yeah.
For the last 10 years, he's had no internet, no telephone communications.
The idea of him died down a long time
That's
ago.
right. And even the Al-Qaeda spokespeople, when they came out and they're like, we can't even confirm he's dead. What does that say? Like, the movement as a movement is, you know, flourishing or whatever it's doing without Osama bin Laden. He was their poster boy. But you know what I mean? Like, and it's interesting because Robert Fisk, who's the journalist from The Independent, said America actually turned Osama bin Laden into this martyr, into this hero. In the Arab countries, when he first came out, because he actually preached revolution, not just against Americans, but against the various Arab states, right?
Yeah, and yet Robert Fisk, like he was saying in his article, was saying that Osama bin Laden, although he called for the rebellions, like you said, he didn't end up actually doing anything. It was the Arab youth themselves who overthrew the regimes. So, like you're saying,
he was
it's
like technically a failure.
Yeah.
But it's the US who actually have turned him into this martyr or hero. And that brings us to the third camp of basically the Muslim views on this, right? Now, we're not here to say, you know, speak about Osama bin Laden, who was he, but it just seems that, you know, it's black and white. So you either praise him as a martyr and, you know, advocate his cause, or you basically have to hate him. And this has been some...
sorry, let's just clarify. You're saying that this is what people are perceiving the 2 camps of Muslims to be, not that people do actually advocate him or that people are against him.
Actually, I think I mean it both ways, because there were protests around the world, some areas in the Muslim world, especially in Pakistan, where they came out, they had pictures of Osama bin Laden, and they were basically mourning the death of a martyr. And then you had other people, especially like, for example, CARE, the
American Muslim organizations got together and all released statements saying that they are glad that he died.
Basically, that's what I'm saying. So you have celebrations, but also I think as Australian Muslims, you feel like the air is kind of to put you into a camp. It's like, so Miran, Osama bin Laden died, and they just wait and grin to see what your reaction is going to be.
You mentioned having the experience of, because you work in several Muslim organizations, one of the organizations, without naming names, was
actually approached by the media to see what they thought of this, right? And it's interesting because at the end of the day, it's not a black and white issue. You don't need to support Osama bin Laden and his, you know, horrific slaughter of civilians to not agree with the US foreign policy. Does that make sense?
No, I agree with you, because, I mean, okay, I'm going to refer to Robert Fisk's article again, and I think something to note is that Robert Fisk actually met Osama bin Laden 3 times and interviewed him, so he sort of, like, he knows where he's coming from. And in an article he published yesterday in The Independent, he says, well, if this is a US victory, so, okay, now they've gotten rid of bin Laden, why are they still in Afghanistan? Does this mean that the US troops should go home now?
Definitely.
You know, and that's definitely a question out there, because, like, okay, for me, I have to say,
closer to home, Julia Gillard.
Yeah, she's come out and said, I'm not pulling out my troops from Afghanistan. And I think whether you agree with her pulling them out or not, it draws attention to one major point, which is, even though he died, is terrorism still out there? Of course it is. You know, there's still threats.
That's right.
But I think...
The problem is it's with the rhetoric. For the last, since 2001, we've been hearing Osama. Even like that Facebook group, like his number one hide and seek champion, right? Yeah. So we've been conditioned to feel like terrorism equals Osama. And now they've got Osama. It's like, okay, you know, is terrorism over? Like, do you reckon this propaganda, this rhetoric is going to move from this like black and white dichotomous discussion on terrorism?
I don't think so. I think, you know, people, once they start settling down and getting over the news of his death, are going to probably start getting a bit paranoid. Like, people have already started talking about possibilities of revenge attacks. You know, what if people wanted to avenge Osama's death? I'm not sure, you know, how far you can go without falling into some sort of dramatization of any of this, really. But bottom line, Osama may have been a terrorist, according to US policy, but he's definitely not the only threat to any country out there.
That's right. Yeah.
So his death doesn't change that fact. In Crikey this week, Bernard Keane actually wrote an article called Cowboys, Indians and Printing the Legend of Bin Laden's Death, where he covers the different way that media's covered it. And I think one interesting point that he raises is the whole idea of the way that Osama bin Laden was buried, as we referred to it in the beginning of the segment, saying that, you know, it was allegedly an Islamic way of burial. I don't know where they got that from. But anyway, the point is that by killing him and by, you know, getting rid of the body that way, a lot of people who may have wanted to seek justice from him didn't actually get that. And the interesting thing is that Bernard Keane actually puts Muslims down as some people who might have wanted justice from Osama bin Laden, saying that we have been deprived of the opportunity to see this man put on trial and confronted by those who have suffered as a consequence of Al-Qaeda actions, including, one would have hoped, many Muslims, given Al-Qaeda was far more expert at slaughtering its co-religionists than Americans.
That's right.
His death removes the possibility of the other valid forms of justice human have managed to establish in independent courts. So, I mean, it reminds me of Saddam Hussein, you know, like when they had those trials and they executed him and stuff. I guess in a way, some people who may not
Felt
have
like
been
they got
happy.
justice.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying has come from both ends, because you have a lot of international relations lawyers coming out and saying basically his killing was against the rule of law. But also a lot of Muslim scholars, I know Yahya Ibrahim was tweeting, he was saying basically like the Al-Qaeda movement was engaged in a lot of like takfir against against other Muslim organizations, saying they're not Muslims, blah, 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 and engaging in, you know, they're killing and things like that. So he was saying for the Muslims, it's not even an issue of like foreign policy and things like that. It comes down to the ideology of, you know, these so-called religious figures. So I think that's definitely something to look into. But I think that, honestly, Miran, the problem with this issue is it's really hard to find a grounding of what is the truth anymore. Like, it's just all hype stories. Like, ABC just had this, cover on Osama bin Laden's wives, right? So he was saying one of them was his first cousin, and he married her while he was very young. But the most interesting one is one of his youngest and his favorable wives was actually a gift given to him by a Yemeni family when she was just a teenager. And this is in the ABC, and it's really interesting because it's like, okay, so is just some like, you know, tale out of Arabian Nights or something? Or
it does sound pretty hard to believe. I think the whole situation is pretty hard to believe, and especially when you put it in context of something like, you know, why now? Because apparently when they said the news, it was about a week after he had died, and a lot of people will tell you, no, we reckon Osama bin Laden died a long time ago, and they just, you know, froze his body and waited for the right time. That's one conspiracy theory that's going around. But it's interesting to note that this news comes out at a time when the US administration is under attack for the way it's handling things in the Middle East. Like, for example, its support of dictators, and then its quick turnaround to say, oh, no, you know what, we support the democracy fighters. Its late reactions to things that have been happening in Libya and what happens in Egypt. All of this and things that are happening in America as well is not really... It hasn't been very useful to Barack Obama's election campain. There's elections coming up.
The ratings went skyrocketed over the last 2 days, and it makes you think. You know, like there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there about his death, and was he really dead a couple of years ago, and they're bringing it out now, and the Photoshop pictures and things like that. Now, we're not contesting the fact that he might have died or he might have not died, because his daughter actually came out and gave an interview to the newspaper saying that he actually was captured and then killed before his family and stuff. And that seems to be a first eye account, like a witness.
Or you might also have people come out and say, how do you know that was really his daughter?
You know, if we're going to do that, we're just going to keep saying, how do you know? No, but honestly, I think that's definitely the issue here. Like, with this whole Osama bin Laden saga, is the truth is really, really hard to put your finger upon. And I think definitely it's just, guys, exercise critical thought, and don't take everything that's chucked at you at face value. Like, definitely look into it and see what's out there.
But I think the most important thing to highlight is if someone approaches you just because you're Muslim and tries to, you know, figure out how you're feeling about it, I mean, I really feel that it's in very poor taste to generalize and take it that just because he was Muslim, that the rest of the Muslim world should be along the same line. And I guess that's pretty much the root of Islamophobia over the past how many years since the September 11 attacks.
Definitely. Well, our audience, if you do want to go research that Shaykh Yasir Qadhi opinion piece, I think it's very, very interesting because he doesn't take a side. He doesn't say, you know, I'm so happy he died, or he says, oh, he was a martyr. But he actually shows that within the discourse, like as a Muslim, why should we be feeling, you know, loyal to either way? Why can't we just critically analyze the events as they come? So have a look at that opinion piece, and we'll put a link to the Facebook page, inshallah.
The Why Factor.